Imagine this, yeah? It's Leeds, 1977. Rain on the cobbles, orange streetlights buzzing, and every woman you know is checking over her shoulder. Mothers, students, sex workers, girls coming off late shifts, all being told the same thing. Don't go out after dark unless you're with a bloke. Not 'cause of a war, not 'cause of a pandemic, because of one man. A bloke in a car, a hammer in his hand. And for 5 long years he turns the north of England into a hunting ground. This is part 1 of a 2-part deep dive into the Yorkshire Ripper investigation, the case that broke families, broke careers and forced British policing to drag itself out of the paper age and into computers. A case where the police interviewed the killer 9 times and still let him walk away. You're watching the Old Bailey Archives. Stick the kettle on, get comfy, 'cause this one is a labyrinth of index cards, bad leads, and one £5 note that nearly stopped everything dead. Right, let's roll it back. Scene 1. Leeds and the lockdown before lockdown. Mid-70s Leeds and Bradford weren't just a bit rough round the edges, they were living under a kind of unofficial curfew. From October 1975 to November 1980, Peter Sutcliffe murdered 13 women and attacked at least 8 more across Leeds, Bradford, Manchester and Huddersfield. At first, police framed it as a problem just in the red light districts, places like Chapelton in Leeds, long demonised as the city's vice strip. But then, June 1977, everything changes. 16-year-old shop assistant Jane MacDonald is murdered walking home in Leeds. She's not a sex worker, she's a teenager, an innocent girl as the papers call her. And suddenly, every woman in the north realises if he can kill her, he can kill anyone. Police advice starts going out. Don't walk alone at night. Don't go out unless absolutely necessary. And if you do, go out with a male escort. Not written law, but everyone hears it. Everyone feels it. Women remember having to be picked up, dropped off, chaperoned. Parents start telling daughters, "You're not going out. End of." Feminists in Leeds are furious. They organise Reclaim the Night marches. 11 different towns marching on the same night, holding banners that basically say, "Why are we locked in? Put a curfew on the blokes doing the killing." So that's the atmosphere you're working with. Whole cities living in fear, police under pressure, press screaming for answers. And somewhere in all that noise, the one bloke they need to catch is quietly driving lorries up and down the motorway. Scene 2. The lorry driver who could be anywhere. Peter Sutcliffe's day job, lorry driver. Clark Transport, Bradford. On paper, just another working class bloke doing long shifts. To his bosses, he's a model employee, keeps his wagon spotless, does his runs, no fuss. The kind of fella you'd nod to over a brew and never think twice about. But that job gives him something gold-plated from a killer's point of view. Mobility. He has every excuse to be in Leeds one night, Manchester the next, Huddersfield the night after. A lorry parked on a side street at 2 a.m, no one bets an eyelid. He's on a run. And crucially, the money. In late September 1977, Clark Transport collects fresh wage packets from a Midland Bank branch in Shipley, just outside Bradford. New, crisp £5 notes in those envelopes, serial numbers in a neat little run. One note from that batch ends up in Sutcliffe's pay packet. 2 days later, that note is in the hands of a woman who will become one of the key turning points of this whole investigation. Scene 3. The £5 note that nearly stopped him. 10 days later, police searched the area again and find Jean's handbag just outside the original search zone. Inside, hidden in a pocket, is that same £5 note, fresh, crisp, serial number AW51-12165, part of a run from AW51-12150 to 12169. Bank of England investigators trace it back. It's from a £25,000 consignment, 5,000 £5-pounders, delivered to Midland Bank branches in Manningham, Shipley and Bingley on 29 September 1977. From there, the cash goes to local firms for wage packets. Clark Transport is on that list. Greater Manchester Police move into West Yorkshire. They sit down with the bank and narrow the field to a handful of companies drawing out new fivers for pay that weekend. Total staff to be interviewed, 241. That's it. Manageable. Concrete. On that list, at number 76, is employee of T&W H. Clark Limited, Peter Sutcliffe. He gets interviewed in November 1977. He tells them he was at an housewarming party the night Jean was killed. When police come back, his mother backs him up with a written statement. The officers think the alibi is a bit odd, but they accept it. They move on. That £5 note, which Sutcliffe himself says later he was waiting for the inevitable over, doesn't bring him down. The resurrected inquiry gets quietly wound down in January 1978. And from that point on, Sutcliffe murders another 7 women. Think about that. A fiver sitting in a dead woman's handbag, traced to a single payroll batch at a branch just down the road from his work. And because of one dodgy alibi that no one really pushes, he walks.
Scene 4. Inside the Ripper room. 2.5 million cards and no answers.
While all this is going on, the investigation itself is mutating into a monster. At Millgarth Police Station in Leeds, they set up a dedicated incident room, what becomes known as the Ripper room. Everything, every sighting, every statement, every car registration, every scrap of info goes onto index cards. And not a few drawers worth. We're talking 2.5 million cards by the time it's over. On top of that, they build a nominal index of suspects, people who've come up in interviews, leads or odd reports. By 1981, that has over 250,000 names. Sutcliffe's name's on there. Not once, not twice, multiple times. By 1979, there are at least 4 separate index cards on him in the central index, and he's been interviewed 9 times by various officers over the course of the inquiry. But here's the problem. There's no computer, no automatic cross-reference, just humans, card trays and coloured pins. One officer in 1977 doesn't see what another officer wrote in 1979 unless they happen to pull the same card or physically cross-link it. And in that chaos, Sutcliffe's cards never get consolidated into one high-priority suspect file. They even have a league table of suspects. Division 1, 26 names. Top of that list, a totally innocent taxi driver they follow for months. Division 2, about 200 names. Division 3, over 1,000 suspects, including Peter Sutcliffe. So he's there, in the system, but buried in Division 3, drowning in paper. It's not that there's no information, it's the opposite. There's too much. The system's choking on it. And every new lead, every phone call, every bloke down the pub reckons it's his mate, just adds more cards to those shelves. By the time they finally nail him, the official review will say it blunt. The card index system was overwhelmed and not properly cross-referenced, leading to crucial evidence against Sutcliffe getting lost in the system. Scene 5. The voice from Wareside. Just when the investigation is teetering under its own weight, another voice enters the room. Between March 1978 and June 1979, a man in Sunderland, John Humble, decides to insert himself into one of the biggest manhunts in British history. He sends 3 letters, postmarked from Sunderland, 2 to Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield, the man running the Ripper inquiry, and 1 to the Daily Mirror. In 'em, he claims to be the Yorkshire Ripper, signs off as Jack and mocks the police. Then comes the tape. A cassette recording lands on Oldfield's desk. On it, a bloke with a strong Wearside Geordie accent says things like, "I'm Jack. I have the greatest respect for you, George, but Lord, you're no nearer catching me now than 4 years ago when I started." Now you'd think, check it, test it, be cautious, yeah? And to be fair, some people do. An FBI profiler, John Douglas, warns it's almost certainly a hoax. Voice experts raise doubts. Some local officers think, why would a genuine killer go this public? But George Oldfield, this is a man who's been living, breathing and probably dreaming this case. He's promised families he'll catch the killer. He's working 18-hour days, chain smoking, living on stress. By now his identity's basically fused with catching the Ripper. So when that voice says George on tape, it's like a hook in his brain. He believes it. He fronts a full-blown PR push. They play the tape at press conferences, on TV news, even in working men's clubs in the North East, asking the public to come forward if they recognise the voice. The hoax becomes the investigation. Police launch Project R. They pour manpower into Wearside. Around 40,000 men in the Sunderland area are interviewed, voice-checked, ruled in or out based on whether they sound like the man on that tape. There's just one slight problem. Peter Sutcliffe's from Bingley, West Yorkshire. No Geordie accent, no Wearside connection. So while the squad's airing off up north, the actual killer's still driving his lorry between Bradford and Leeds, right under their noses. And the biggest twist, in September 1979, Humble panics. He phones the police anonymously and says the letters and tape were a hoax. The call's logged, but the officer who takes it assumes it's yet another hoaxer trying to throw them off, and no one switches the investigation back. Later, courts will say straight up the hoax delayed Sutcliffe's arrest by about 18 months, and in that window, more women died. Scene 6. The cop who worked himself to the ground. Let's talk a bit more about George Oldfield. He's not a cardboard villain in this story, he's complicated. On one hand, he makes catastrophic judgment calls. On the other, he more or less works himself to death trying to solve the case. He's a classic old-school detective, hard drinking, chain smoking, deeply committed, but not trained in modern case management or media handling. He personally promises Jane McDonald's parents he'll catch their daughter's killer, which is a hell of a thing to carry. When the Wearside tape lands, he sees it as a direct challenge, the killer talking to him. And once he's decided it's real, everything gets filtered through that assumption. If you don't sound like a Mackham, you're slid down the list. All this while running a 200-strong Ripper squad, thousands of interviews, huge media pressure. The toll is brutal. In August 1979, just months after the tape goes public, Oldfield has an heart attack. He's off the case for months. He never really comes back to it in the same way. In 1983, he suffers a second heart attack and retires. He dies in 1985 at just 61. Colleagues and friends later describe him as the Ripper's 14th victim. Not literally, obviously, but in the sense that the pressure, the failures and the public flack, they all add up to a man crushed under the weight of a case that spun out of his control.
Another thing the later Byford report digs into, and honestly, it needs saying, is how the police talked about the victims. Early on, senior officers described the murderer as someone who hates prostitutes. Many people do. Then when Jane McDonald is killed, a senior detective tells the press he's now killing innocent girls. Think about the implication there. Some women are innocent, some not. And that attitude seeps into how leads are prioritised. Survivors like Marcella Claxton, a black woman attacked in 1976 who gave a detailed, accurate description of Sutcliffe, were dismissed, mislabelled as sex workers, and even racially abused. Her evidence could have been a huge red flag. Instead, it's buried in that mountain of paper. Decades later, in 2020, West Yorkshire Police will formally apologise for this language and for the way many of the women, especially sex workers and women of colour, were treated and spoken about. But in the late 70s, that prejudice is baked into the system that's supposed to be protecting them. Scene 8. Just a traffic stop. Sheffield, January 2nd, 1981. After all the hoax tapes, league tables and index cards, the thing that finally brings the Yorkshire Ripper in is a routine traffic stop. 2nd January 1981, about 10:50 p.m, Broomill, Sheffield. Two South Yorkshire officers, probationary constable Robert Ides and Sergeant Robert Ring, spot a brown Rover in the driveway of Light Trades House on Melbourne Avenue. Inside, a bloke and a 24-year-old sex worker, Olivia Reevers. They run the plates. They're false, bogus registration, so they nick him on that. Nothing glamorous, no big got-ya moment, just basic coppering. They take him to Hamerton Road station in Sheffield. His name goes on the system, Peter William Sutcliffe. That name pings in West Yorkshire. On those index cards, it's one of the many they've seen before. 9 interviews, multiple sightings, a bloke who never quite fit but never quite stuck. So West Yorkshire detectives come over to talk to him again, this time at Dewsbury where he's been transferred. They check his car, find screwdrivers in the glove box, dodgy but not killer-proof on their own. Meanwhile, the Sheffield officers, hearing he's now being looked at as the Ripper suspect, go back to where they first stopped him. Behind the building, about 50 feet from where the car had been, they find a hammer and a knife hidden in the bushes. Turns out, when they'd let him out to have a wee at the side of the building, he'd quietly ditched the murder kit. Now that's a very particular kind of behaviour, innit? Calm enough under pressure to slip the tools away, thinking about forensics, thinking about not being caught. Back in Dewsbury, they start pressing him. On 4 January 1981, partway through questioning, he suddenly gives the game up. He says something along the lines of, "It's all right, I know what you're leading up to. The Yorkshire Ripper. It's me. I killed all those women." Then he talks, for hours, over and over, coolly, almost matter of fact, describing attacks that had kept entire cities in terror. Later he'll tell people it was just a miracle they did not apprehend me earlier. They had all the facts. And looking at the files, the Byford report basically agrees. So here's where we leave part 1. By early January 1981, the shadow that hung over Leeds, Bradford, Manchester and Huddersfield turns out not to be some faceless monster, not some mythic beast living on the moors. It's a quiet, married lorry driver from the suburbs, a bloke who went to work, had his tea, saw his family and then went out at night with a hammer. But the story doesn't end with the arrest, not by a long shot, because when this case hits London, Court 1 at the Old Barley, something extraordinary happens. Behind those carved wooden panels and that famous sword of justice, a deal's quietly being stitched up. The prosecution and the defence both turn up expecting to tell the judge he's not pleading guilty to murder, he's pleading guilty on grounds of diminished responsibility. The doctors say he's mentally ill. We're all agreed. And then one man in a red robe, Mr. Justice Leslie Boreham, says in effect, no, not good enough, not this time. Part 1, index cards, done. Next, lorry driver versus judge, no insane escape. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Also consider supporting the channel by checking out the book and Audible affiliate links in the description. See you all in part 2.